It's Mr. Superstar James Corden. Now, you might tell me he's been in your restaurant because you get a lot of celebrity visiting your restaurant. He was banned from Balthazar's. I know Balthazar's in Covent Garden. I don't know the one in New York, but it's apparently very similar. It was built as a kind of a replica, if you like, because he was very, very rude. The most abusive customer ever, according to the guy that runs Balthazar's, because apparently he ordered with his wife, who I think we can just see him walking into a do now with, ordered a white egg omelette and was given some kind of white egg omelette that had a bit of yolk in it, and he went berserk. I mean, come on. What do you do with people like that?
Okay, well, where do you start with that? Okay, is he still barred, or is he?
No, apparently, the restaurant owner actually put out an Instagram post, and he saw it and then was horrified because I think he'd obviously forgotten how much of a really miserable character he had been, and so he profusely apologised. And so the Balthazar's guys have now said, well, since he's been so gracious in apologising, we will let him back in. But he was banned. He was basically banned because of his behaviour.
Look, at the end of the day, there's absolutely no reason whatsoever to ever talk badly to anybody in polite society, regardless of their standing. It doesn't matter if you're talking to King Charles or if you're talking to the fellow who brings you your tea. At the end of the day, we're all human, we're all people, and we're all worthy of respect. And yeah, I mean, absolutely. If you're rude, if you're aggressive, you deserve to be banned. 100%.
But have you had that? I mean, you've been in the restaurant business all your life, really. I mean, have you ever had a really, really horrible customer, and how did you deal with them?
I've only, in 55 years of having our restaurant, we've only ever banned 2 people, which I think is not bad going.
That's pretty good. Anybody we know?
Michael Winner was banned for about 10 years.
Oh, was he?
Yeah, he was banned for about 10 years for being particularly rude to my mum.
Right.
My dad called him a dirty man with dirty money, and then he
used to live around the corner from there, didn't he?
He did. He lives in a house that's now owned by Robbie Williams. Yeah.
Okay, right.
But he was particularly in a bullying mood that day,
right.
I think.
And was he not a restaurant critic as well at one point?
He was. He would win his dinners, for the Sunday Times. Yeah. And he spoke very kindly to us on many occasions, most of which after we banned him, which was quite odd.
That's brilliant. And who was the other one then?
He became really nice. Oh, the other one was just some fella who refused to leave because he was drunk and being abusive. So in the end, me and a couple of other guys just picked up his table and walked the table out the restaurant, and he was sat there by himself with no table and a knife and fork in his hand. and then he realized, and then when he finally stood up to leave, everyone got up and applauded.
Yeah. I mean, I had a very interesting one in New York, actually, because you know how they take their service very seriously in New York. And I used to go to this little restaurant down in the West Village called Bruxelles, which was Brussels with an X in the middle. And I went out. There was 4 of us going out for a meal. And as we sat down, and we were looking at the menu and perusing the menu, I felt this kind of tickle on my leg, and I looked down, and there was a cockroach climbing up the inside of my trouser leg. And I thought, that's not great, and it is New York, and people know there are cockroaches. It's one of those things. And I called the waiter. I said, excuse me, I said, there's a cockroach just climbing up my leg here. Maybe you need to do something about that. And he went, are you sure he didn't bring it with you? And I was like, sorry? He said, well, it might have been in the taxi. I said, look, I'm pretty sure there's never been a cockroach in a taxi. Anyway, the meal was very nice, but his routine was pretty grumpy, and he was not very pleasant as a waiter. So the bill came, and it was quite expensive. Gave him no tip. And he came back and he said to me, excuse me, sir, he says, I think you've forgotten to tip us. I said, no, I haven't forgotten to tip you. I've basically decided not to tip you, not least because you were pretty grumpy, but also because a cockroach climbed up my leg and you didn't seem to be very sympathetic. And he said, well, thanks very much indeed. He said, don't come back. And it was that sort of, he's like, don't come over. So effectively tell us to just get out. Because they can be like that in New York. They can be very rude, particularly if you don't give them any money for a tip.
Well, lucky, I mean, he's obviously a very blessed man that he can turn away business like that. I wouldn't be quite so bold, to be honest with you.
Well, it was the 80s, so everybody had a lot of money in those days, unlike now.
Yeah, not anymore.
No, exactly right. So have you never had James Corden in your place then?
I have never had James Corden in my place, certainly not to my knowledge anyway, Mike. But I mean, if he comes in, he'll be treated with 5-star service just like everyone else is, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And I think it very much depends on the kind of how you set up your place. I think that customers like to find something of themselves reflected in the restaurant that they go to.
Right.
So if you set yourself up to...
Oh, we've just stalled out there for a moment. We'll see if we can get that back in a moment. We're talking to James Chiavarini there about the value of just being nice to people. I think we've got you back, James.
Oh, good. Here I am.
Yeah, sorry.
I was just saying that, oh, that's okay, Mike. So I was just basically saying that I think it very much depends on how you set up your restaurant. If you have a very low key, modest neighborhood restaurant like we do, you're gonna attract those same kind of people. I think Mr. McNally in New York is renowned for running slightly more glitzy places, and you're going to attract a certain more glitzy clientele, and that comes with this whole other set of problems.
Yeah. Do you know what I find very irritating? And I know some people will go, "Oh, look at you talking about going out for dinner when nobody can afford to." But I'm really annoyed at these restaurants that give you a sort of 2-hour window, and they go, because you're going in already feeling a bit resentful. Because you're going, well, we've got a table for 7, but you've got to be out of it by 9 o'clock. You know, it's nonsense, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the average, I think a lot of that is done on basically average turn time. So it is a business like any other business. And we work to the 2-hour rule, but we don't enforce it. So in the sense that we'll always keep a couple of tables like up our sleeve, so that we know that if a customer or a table does want to stay longer, then you can rejig the plan.
Right.
And you know, it's a bit like those things that that planning is imperative, but plans themselves are useless. When you start a service, you don't know how long people are going to stay.
No, exactly right. And finally, let me just ask you about the shenanigans going on down in Westminster, because we're hearing, as of yesterday, a lot of pubs are actually closing up over the course of the next few weeks and months because they can't afford the electricity bills, they can't afford the heating bills. Restaurants are going out of business. I think you and I have spoken before about some restaurants now only opening for a limited number of evenings or a limited number of days. I know you've got a fixed-term bill situation, but it's pretty serious, this, isn't it?
It's incredibly serious. It's incredibly serious. It's going to be brutal. It's going to be, or just pray for a mild, windy winter, effectively. If this continues, and if you have a particularly bad cold snap and the war in Ukraine doesn't show any sign of ending soon, I think there's going to be a whole lot of places just chucking the keys back to the landlord. And I think, to be honest with you, I think the business rates, the rent, I think that's the minimum of it. If you can't afford to pay your utilities and you can't afford to pay your staff, you've got no business left. It's just that simple.
No, exactly. And what do you make of the whole Liz Truss, Jeremy Hunt business? I mean, do you want him to be the next Prime Minister?
No. In a word, but who do I want to be Prime Minister? I actually think, and I was thinking about this last night, I think, and this, I appreciate that this is out there, I think the Tories could turn it around. Okay. I think they can win the next election. And I think they can do it if they appointed somebody who is very good on the economy as Chancellor, and they took somebody like Kemi Badenoch as Prime Minister, and she went after Labour on the whole woke agenda. And and they could go to town on Labour on that effectively. And if they could keep the market stable and just keep jabbing at Labour on the whole thing that they don't even know what a woman is, I think that they've got a chance of bringing back into the fold the working class Tories that they've lost they desperately need back. I grew up in a working class conservative neighbourhood, southeast London. Nobody represents those people anymore. Nobody.
Shocking state of affairs. Listen, I'm going to come and abuse your staff shortly, and come and get myself a late lunch and see how we get along. But thank you very much indeed, Jay.